Washoe County Library System welcomes you to our monthly series from the Nevada Historical Society presents High Noon with Neal Cobb. This afternoon's topic is Lost City Museum, a hidden gem on Southern Nevada's Arrowhead Trail, presented by archaeologist and curator Virginia Lucas. My name is Jennifer, and I'm happy to be here with you today. And now I would like to introduce Sherry Hazorn with the Nevada Historical Society. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Tim, with the Washoe County Library System. So let me introduce our wonderful host that has been a longtime supporter and honorary curator with the Nevada Historic Society, Neal Cobb. He has been such a supporter since at least 1988, if not sooner, and we so appreciate his passion for history and wanting to share great stories with you. So without further ado, let me introduce Neal. Hey, Neal.
Thanks, Sherry. It is my pleasure today to tell you just a little bit more about our speaker, Virginia Lucas. Virginia was originally from Lebanon, Tennessee, but she moved to Las Vegas in 2015, where she is currently the PhD candidate in the University of Nevada, Las Vegas Department of Anthropology, specializing in zoo archaeology. She is a curator of archaeology at the Lost City Museum in Overton, Nevada. Virginia has worked and completed funnel analysis on sites in both the southeastern and southwestern United States. She has also co-directed a field school in Transylvania region of Romania. Currently, her research focus is on subsistence practices of the lowland Virgin Branch ancestral Puebloans. At this time, we welcome Virginia Lucas to High Noon.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'll go on and share my screen. So we have the PowerPoint up. So again, like I said, thank you for having me. I'm, like I said, the curator here at Lost City Museum down in Overton. And we're going to be talking about Pueblo Grande de Nevada, the Lost City pageant, and what that meant with the CCC and us. So to start off, to show you kind of where we're talking about. So this is the northern part of Lake Mead. And so the site of Pueblo Grande de Nevada is going to be right in this region here. This is the Muddy River coming down here. And this is the Virgin River that goes on up into Utah and Arizona as well. So back in the 1920s, there was talk of a site down at that area of the confluence of the Muddy River and the Virgin River. It had been known to the public for many years at this point. So in 1827, Jedediah Smith had written about it. He had been in this region. He had collected items from Paiute camps, and he was shown salt caves on that lower Virgin River. So further down, just right around as the Virgin River connected into the Colorado River that was dammed to form the lake. But in the 1920s, we had Governor James Scrugham, who was very interested in archaeology and also trying to boost tourism, because 1920s archaeology was huge. King Tut had just been found, his tomb had just been found in 1922. And so he's hoping to build off that, because Las Vegas in the 1920s is not the Las Vegas that you know it today. So he sent a call out for anybody knowing of any archaeological sites in the South, in southern Nevada. So two brothers by the name of John and Faye Perkins reached out and were like, hey, we have a site down here that might be of interest. So Governor Scrugham, that's him on the right, contacted Mark Harrington, who was an archaeologist to send him down there to take a look. And so he comes down, and John and Faye take him out there. This is Faye here on the left in this one, and John on the right. Comes out, brings him out. Story goes that they're walking through the site of Pueblo Grande de Nevada, and Mark Harrington is seeing pottery sherds on the ground, and they're telling him, "Oh, don't worry about that stuff. We'll show you where the good stuff is." And so takes him, shows him the outlines of pueblos and things like that. And at this point, this is the furthest west that had been known for the ancestral Puebloan or the Anasazi to have come. And the story also goes that Dr. Mark Harrington took these sherds that he had excavated from these sites to Mexico, New Mexico, for an archaeologist to look at, who basically told him these are not, don't exist. The Virgin Puebloan do not go that far west, and threw those sherds in the trash. Well, Harrington grabbed them and carried them on, come back up here to southern Nevada. Harrington and Governor Scrugum are the ones who named the site Pueblo Grande de Nevada. But this also made like huge headlines. These are a couple of photos before I get to that of some of the early excavations. So these are from probably around 1923, 1924. So not sure who these folks are. That I believe is Willis Evans, who I'll talk about here in just a second. But they moved quite a bit of dirt in these excavations. Here's another one. Just looking, it's there. So the pueblos down here are very different from pueblos you would typically see at like Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, multi-story pueblos. These here are single story, C-shaped, at most roughly 100 rooms, but that's it. And where the ones at like Chaco Canyon and those sites, you're talking into the like 600, 700, 800 room pueblos. So these were relatively small, but several of them were around, and they're throughout the valley, throughout along the Muddy River. So this is Mark Harrington standing next to a Pueblo foundation. You have a lot of times double insulated walls here, so two different walls, helps with temperature and things like that, helps temperature regulation. All right, so out there though, because they have a lot of material that they're excavating, they built a field house out there. This was actually the very first Lost City Museum. I have another picture later that has just museum written above it, because they needed a place to keep the artifacts. But because of this site, it was sensationalized all over. These newspapers around the country reported on the Lost City. There were things ran in New York, in Connecticut, all the way up to Seward, Alaska. Ran articles about the Lost City, and there were some very sensationalized claims here too, where they were talking about that these were very tall, like 7, 8 foot tall giants that were wrapped in silken robes. We don't have silk down here in southern Nevada, and we did not have there. So things were getting sensationalized. Mark Harrington did try to combat that, but as we see today, even the media just took this and ran with it, because having the idea of a lost city was pretty cool back in the day, and still is, because this site, our place is pretty awesome. But you have to build on all of this. You have they're really wanting to capitalize on it, so they decided to do a pageant in May. First one was in May of 1925. This was so popular that they actually built a small train station out at St. Thomas, which is a ghost town now on Lake Mead, or it was covered by Lake Mead. It's now, you can go visit it. And would truck people in to the actual pageant site. So in this photo here, you can actually see the line of cars waiting to pick people up off the platform, to go back to the pageant site. They ran special excursions. You could do a round trip fare from Las Vegas up here for $3.75 on Union Pacific train. They said roughly around 6,000, 7,000 people were here for that, the first pageant, which when you're in a very tiny town, because Overton wasn't even really established at this point, it was just St. Thomas, that's a pretty big increase. So this is one of just visiting folks. This is actually one of my favorite pictures from the 1920s. Mark Harrington is this guy here. This is Governor Scrugum. And then this is Willis Evans. But one of the things I love about this photo, if you know anything on photography, you know back in the 1920s, you had to hold really still for pictures. And this kid down here decided he did not want to. So we have a very blurry face. Everybody else did great, but you know, it's one of those, just being from 1924, the crispness of this is pretty amazing. So out there at the pageant, they had to also erect pueblos because they were doing this pageant. It was the history of people in southern Nevada. So these are pueblos that they erected. This is actually, they brought in folks from the Pueblo of Zuni to help build these, also to participate in the pageant itself. This is Mark Harrington. This is also one of my favorite pictures as well, of Harrington checking out the pueblos there before the pageant. These are some of the Zuni dancers. And being also one that loves jewelry, I love looking at the jewelry on these folks. You can see, I've got a couple other photos here in a minute where you can see a little bit more in depth of what this pageant entailed. We're hoping to get a fuller program of what all happened. This was organized as part with Brigham Young University, and brought people down to enact this, and they use local folks as well. So another couple of Zuni dancers. This is doing the corn dance there, and then photos here so you can see with Lost City Ranch. This was I believe John Perkins here, and with just they were a native family here, and then you can see some of the dancing going on as part of the pageant as well. But all of these are ones, so a lot of these photos we actually found by accident when I was cleaning out my office. They were on a CD that we didn't realize we had these, and so now we put this together because a lot of these have never been seen before, or had up till a couple of years ago. So pageant site here overlooking from where the bleachers are. Nevada spelled out up on the hillside. And then they had horse-drawn carriage. It was a full-on reenactment of everything. And I love this I wished we could see the flag a little better, because obviously we wouldn't have all the 50 stars on the flag, because this was 1925. So this is, pre-states for some of the states. And then this one showing some of the kiddos that participate. And one thing we're trying to do here at the museum is reach out to the Pueblo of Zuni, as well as the Mawapa Band of Paiute, who are the other groups that were helping out, or that were hired for this pageant. So what we're hoping to do is try to put names with faces on here, because unfortunately we don't have that. So we've been sending photos to them, and then letting them, reach out to contacts to see if we can figure out people. So this is just a photo showing a kid learning the bow and arrow. And then This is one that we all enjoy too, because we love this one where they're poking out of the actual Pueblo and to get their photo made as well. And again, most of these people we don't know, but I will show one in a couple of minutes, I think. Then explain who he is, which was a pretty neat thing to find. Um, we're not sure. We think these are just actors or some of the actors that were in the pageant. We don't know who they are. And we believe this is actually Louis Shellbach, who was one of the archaeologists down here in southern Nevada. All right, so I mentioned Willis Evans a while ago. Willis Evans was Pitt River native that had worked with Mark Harrington for years. He worked actually up at Lovelock Cave on sites. And so when Governor Scrogum had sent Mark Harrington down here, he sent Mark Harrington wanted Willis Evans to come with him. Willis Evans went on to do a lot of archaeological work throughout southern Nevada, several sites down here, including sites here at the museum that we have on our property. And he worked up at the Lehman Caves, Lehman National Monument, before it became Great Basin National Park. And from what we read through an oral history project, Mark Harrington actually sent him to school for archaeology. So he rose pretty high up with learning archaeology and practicing it. But what makes this picture pretty unique and pretty awesome is this is his father, George Evans, that we have an exhibit here in the museum that's built around a cradle board that was made by this man for Willis back in 1896, I believe, when Willis was born. And it's been passed down to the youngest son each generation. So we've worked with Willis's grandson. And so we realized we knew this was George. And then on those photos that we found in my office, I saw this one and was looking at the body paint and the face painting, and like, I'm pretty certain this is the same person because same body paint. So we have a photo of Willis. This is also Willis. This is one that was on that CD as well. He's dressed up. He's actually in several of our old photos that we have in the museum here, demonstrating the atlatl, which is what he's using there. So throwing a spear type projectile. And then this one is him sitting up on the ridge. And this next little bit, it's a 3-minute clip of the pageant that was actually described in the literature because it was found through the University of South Carolina, which was pretty crazy in itself. But it was described as outtakes. Not sure why, I'm not up on the terminology there, but it's a pretty neat little clip. If it will play. It did earlier. There we go. So this is looking out over the ridge there at the Lost City site. And you can actually see people walking there. That's someone walking. So this is a big, expansive area. And then we'll go from this to the actual site itself, or the pageant itself. And so we've sent this as well to the Pueblo of Zuni, because we really want to see, try to get people here. And one of the things we would love to do is bring some of the descendants here to, or at least have, do some recordings to have that connection. So these are folks from the Moapa Band of Paiute that were hired as well for dancing and part of the pageant. So then one of these, this one here, and you'll see her a little closer, the child on the cradle board, we're hoping that we're going to be able to maybe figure out who the baby is, because 1925, that, you know, the person could very well still be alive. They would be 100, maybe 100, you know, roughly 100, maybe 101, at the oldest. So, you know, if that person is still alive, that would be truly a treat, if we would, you know, were able to speak with them, or at the very least, um, you know, any other children or grandchildren. All right. Now, after that pageant and all of this, so we're going to fast forward to the 1930s. 1930s, you have the Great Depression that's happening. And you have those New Deal programs that came about because of Franklin Roosevelt. And one of those was the Civilian Conservation Corps. And a lot of this is due to James Scrugham. So he was no longer governor by this point, but he was a very strong um, advocate for the excavation continuing here, and also designating Valley of Fire State Park as a state park. And he knew where this site was located, where Pueblo Grande de Nevada, the lost city, was located, that those sites are going to be covered by the waters of Lake Mead when the dam is ultimately finished. So they pulled crews off of building the dam to actually come up here to Overton to excavate. And so this is them coming in off the train. And these guys, the CCC boys, moved so much dirt while they were working. They excavated so many rooms, so, you know, found lots of artifacts. This is some of the site layout of at Pueblo Grande de Nevada. And just, you know, here you can see that very classic C-shaped Pueblo looking architecture here, and they're throughout the valley. This is inside one of the rooms, so this was like a fire pit type there in the middle. And then one of the things that they said with Mark Harrington was that he had a tendency that he could look at a sand dune out there and know which one had a pueblo under it, or one that was just a, you know, just a normal sand dune. And this was one of those. One of the CCC pictures, and they would go down about roughly 10 feet of sand. So lots of sand that was being moved, and, you know, and uncovering these pueblos. This was just some bringing them into the site each day. So some of the CCC boys, and one of the guys, which I'll show you a photo later, with the building of the museum, we got some of these photos from that person's grandson, or son, that he ended up settling here and then ultimately moved out of Overton. But just more, this one, a group of the workers together. And then this one you can kind of see with the, you know, just how deep this is. Like that's the wall here, and just moving the dirt to open up those rooms and to showcase those rooms. Another shot of the CCC crew. This one, that's Faye Perkins there. I don't believe Mark Harrington's here, but that's Willis Evans, who by this point was one of the foremen of the CCC crews. Harrington really wasn't down here as much for this portion. He was here in the 20s. He would come in periodically during the 30s, but was not there full time. Now, this next little bit, so part of this whole project, or this talk, are the films. And back when I started here in 2018, I was told we had a film canister that was supposed to be the pageant. It was filmed. We don't know where the film is. We were hoping this was it. So one of our docents paid to have it digitized for us. And so we sent that off, got it back, and we were hoping it was the pageant. It was not. You're going to see it's actually a lot of the excavations. So we'll see Mark Harrington in action. We'll see Willis Evans working. And it's done in the silent film way. So you've got the words on the screen and everything. And this is broken up into two parts. It's a 6-minute film, but it's in two separate parts. So this was, like I said, it was a generous donation by Mr. Jim Riley, who made this possible. And we were really excited to see this, even though it wasn't what we were expecting. Or so again, just showing the landscape around that Pueblo Grande de Nevada site. So down at that point where the two rivers meet. And you can kind of actually see here, there was a Pueblo there. And so this was what was really cool for us. And we've actually had his grandson, Willis's grandson, in at this point to watch this, which was really neat for them too, because Shannon, who is the grandson, was born after Willis had passed away in the 70s, early 70s. So in all of these artifacts, I believe, or we do not have them, are currently in Tucson. This one right here with House 47 has actually been re-excavated back, I want to say in 2010, 2011, by one of my professors, Dr. Karen Hari. That she's done more work out there. Margaret Linus, who is a very big archaeologist here in Southern Nevada, kind of is who put the Virgin Branch into the academic world, because one of the things Harrington never did, he never wrote up his findings. So Margaret Linus did, and did some re-excavations at sites out there. So you can see, these are all pretty small pueblos, just single story. And they can tell that because, there's no roof fall or anything that would suggest another layer of rooms or multiple layers of rooms. These are all done out of, there are stone in there, but mostly like the mud brick and mudding. So that also doesn't preserve as well as you'll see some of those at like Chaco Canyon and things like that. I think this is the one that if you'll watch in the background, there's a little dog that goes running past too, as Dr. Harrington or Mark Harrington is talking about these sites. So there was, I will go on and say, there was footage of a burial being excavated. That's not in part of this. We did leave this here because they were in the floors of the houses, but we don't show burial photos, video, anything like that, due to NAGPRA, which deals with the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. So this is just more of the excavations. Again, you can just see the sheer amount of dirt that is being excavated. Love, seeing, because I know how rough the roads get out here, and seeing cars like this, that made it out there just fine. You also had folks that, you had to have people that catalog items. So this is a person, CCC and Rolly McDonald. So this is house 72. So he would have been excavating here, and then James Oken at the Lost City Ranch headquarters cataloging every artifact that came out of these excavations, because you want to make sure you know what you have so you don't lose it. And also as much location information as you can have as well, because archaeology is one of those destructive sciences that once it's removed, you can't exactly put it back and you lose information. So here's the ranch house. So another this one is from the 30s. And then there's the Lost City Temporary Museum. That was part of the pageant site and the whole ranch area. Faye Perkins standing next to the old Pueblos out at the pageant site. And then you can see, because this is probably about 10 years or so after, so they're already starting to deteriorate a bit. So this next little bit of the film, it actually is going to have some excavations out at the pageant site as well, but also working in a site. This is Mark Harrington and Willis Evans working, actually doing archaeology instead of just, instead of us seeing them walk around. So lots of brushes, and kept really good notes. It is interesting the amount of artifacts that came out there, and a lot of what we have in the museum, which were still whole vessels, which was really neat. Now this is an interesting part to us. We were always told that the Pueblos out at the pageant site were replicas, reproductions. But based off of that little bit that was on the film, that they actually built the Pueblo on top of existing structures. And so we're not sure if that's truly accurate, or if that's just what they put on here. It's one of those things that, why would they do some excavation, which they're going to be having here in a minute, with the CCC folks actually excavating out of this room. Also, I would love to know what he's chiseling in on this piece. We don't know where that is. We don't know if maybe they took it with them. But I would love to know what he's actually doing. But here's, I believe, is the section where where they're digging out the Pueblo. Yeah, there we go. So our museum likely would not exist without the CCC and with John and Faye Perkins as well. So all of that being said, with the pageant, with the excavations, you need a place to put items. And so that's where the Boulder Dam Park Museum comes in. And in the 1930s, that was the name. So they broke ground for our site, for our museum, on December 12th, 1934. And they handmade over 70,000 adobe bricks. That is all of these are bricks behind here, just a sea of bricks. And this one as well, and then in this photo. So they, like I said, they broke ground December 12th, 1934. This was open to the public in July of 35. So 7 months from the ground up, handmade all of these adobe bricks. And we're obviously still standing today. This is actually one of my other favorite photos, just because of the Christmas, and you can see, just how it's going in. But this one is the next photo is one of our iconic pictures here at the museum. So you can still see the Boulder Dam Park Museum. This person right here his name is Ralph McCreary. And he's the one that I was telling you about earlier that his son brought a lot of these pictures in. So his dad worked here, and we actually identified him through other pictures that the son had given us because of the way he stood, the way he always wore his hat. And he was pretty certain this was his dad, so we're 99.9% sure this is him. And so they also in the back of our museum, so the original museum was just the front room. And it was built, like I said, by the CCC. They brought in sandstone from Valley of Fire, but the CCC also made pueblos or built pueblos in the back to show, and these are kind of based off the ones out at the Lost City site. But we do actually have a pueblo on premises that's now in one of our galleries because they built the gallery around it. And we have a pit house as well in front of the museum that the CCC did build up to look like a pit house, but the foundation was there. And so this is actually this is Governor Scrugham or former Governor Scrugham here, and I believe this was early 1930s. Just another photo. You can still go into the pueblos. It is not easy to get in there, having been in two of them. And we actually we re-mud these yearly. Because again, being of mud, actual mud, as it rains, it washes off. So they have to be redone. So front of the museum, Boulder Dam Park Museum, still at this point. And actually this is kind of cool because you can see right here. So this whole area is actually, or sorry, right here is the public restroom, which there's the door for it, and we still have the beam up here that you can see, but it's since been made into just a single. It was split into men and women's, but it's now just a single one. But it was an outside or an outdoor entrance to it. Now, this is also so indoor. This is what the Perkins family and the Lake Mead area folks, the federal government who owned us at the time, this is how they did the museum. And so this is looking out the front door. This is actually our attendance office. So Jesse Davy. This was enclosed in now. So this is filled in. But it's, this window is still there, which is kind of cool. This is gone because there's just cabinets here now. So these photos here, these two outer photos are from the 1950s. So when the museum was built in 35, we were a federal institution. We were part of Lake Mead, so hence the name Boulder Dam Park Museum. But by the 1950s, around 50, 51, they decided, federal government pulled out, and we almost became a county institution, Clark County institution, but ultimately the state took it over. So we are one of the 7 state museums now. And at that time too, the name changed from Boulder Dam Park Museum to Lost City Museum. But also one of the issues when the federal government pulled out, all of those artifacts that the CCC had excavated went with them. And so that's why I said they're down in Tucson now. And actually most everything we have in the museum now is from the rest of the valley of Muddy River, along the Muddy River, with sites along there. And this is actually these two photos. So this is Willis Evans and Faye Perkins. And then this is Mark Harrington here. And then Faye Perkins. So this was the dedication when it became a state institution. Now, during all this time, you've got stuff happening over at St. Thomas, and which was an early LDS settlement. you have the lake coming in. So this is where Lake Mead is starting to encroach onto the pageant site. Um, and so this is kind of after one of the times that the waters had receded, but you can kind of see the damage that's been happening through the years. I think, if I'm not mistaken, these are all gone now. The Pueblos are gone, but the part of the stage, I believe, is still there. And so the museum today looks it's similar but different because they have ended up, instead of leaving the brick open and exposed, though there is a section right around here that you can see it, we've covered it with solid adobe. And so on that note, this is some the monos or the metates out there, and we say the end, but we have it as ... because research is still happening. It's still an ongoing thing that we're learning about the people who lived here. And so finally just thanking people here. Lots of institutions kind of went into with the photos and everything that put this together. All right, and that is it.
Oh, that was amazing. I love that. I know it's such a fascinating history and story. A
Yes.
lot of people don't realize uh, that, how it came to be. So you mentioned that the CCC boys, some of them came down and worked on the site. How long of a time period? You said they
It
built
they were here for
the building, but I was just curious.
They were here from about like 34. So when those New Deal programs started, up until I was around like 37, 38. Some of them even stayed a little longer, pretty much up until the program kind of dissolved with us entering into World War II.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
they were here for a while, and a lot of them actually, ended up staying. Because if you're familiar, you're with the CCC program, these are people from elsewhere come to work. Most of the money gets shipped back to their families, but they meet local folks. Actually, that Ralph McCreary, one of my coworkers who has worked here and had lived in the valley for years, is from here. She's actually found out she's related roundabout to them, which was kind of neat to figure out.
Very cool. So I had heard that before that you guys would have to remud.
Yep.
So is is that because you said that, each year that the structures, so does that include the museum
No,
itself?
the museum itself is not the because one, that's a much larger undertaking.
Okay.
It has been
Okay.
done since I started. It was done early 2019, so right after I started. But we also have for the museum itself, even though the Pueblos are part of that, because we're on the National Historic Register, we have to go through the State Historic Preservation Office to do anything like that. So any
Okay.
major renovations or anything like that, and that's also, it's a huge expense to remud everything. And
Okay.
it was if I remember, like 3 or 4 day project to do the museum itself. It's
Wow.
probably
Okay.
getting to where we need to have it done, because
Mhm.
you can see cracks when you're outside, but I'm not sure when that's going to be on the books again.
Okay. Okay. Um, as I say, you mentioned how many bricks did they make
Over
for the build? It was like
70,000.
30 something? Okay.
70,000.
Oh, 70. I was like, I was like, that's a lot. That
That's a
really is a
lot of
lot.
bricks.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say they did that with Fort Churchill too, when they were rebuilding the walls, that they were making bricks to, you know,
Oh,
uh,
that's cool.
kind of build them back up. So that's interesting. And
Yeah.
that was CCC as well. So,
Yeah, this one,
okay.
it's so amazing how fast this was built. And obviously, we're still standing. The sandstone that they trucked in from Valley of Fire, it's still the original sandstone on the floor. We have rugs over part of it as you're coming in the door, we're very happy about because when we pull that back, you can actually see the original color of the sandstone, and it's the red Aztec sandstone. Now, everything else looks very brown because, you've got 90 years of walking on it. It was
Yeah.
sealed, and it is sealed now. And that was done probably in the 60s, 70s.
Okay.
And then they'll apply a new sealant coat periodically,
Oh,
every 2 or 3 years now.
that's amazing. As I say, because yeah, I mean, it's such a unique feature. But I mean, you guys, you get visitors from around the world,
Oh
don't
yeah.
you?
Yeah, we
Hmm.
actually get surprisingly I think our largest group of international tourists come from Germany. We get a
Oh,
lot of German tourists. I've actually done an article for a German travel magazine. They had reached out an editor back a couple of years ago, and it's in one of theirs. It's an archaeology magazine, but it's also one of the aspects is a travel so that they can send it out to people to encourage travel elsewhere. So wrote that up.
okay.
We kind of did this with some of the history of it, and then had the Willis Evans exhibit showcased.
Well, and you guys also have an Arcadia book about the
Yes.
history of the Lost City Museum, right?
Yes, that was
Hmm.
done several years ago. It was by one of the previous curators and archaeologists, Dina Sader. So
Okay. Okay. Um, uh, so what was I was going to ask? Let me see. I've got at least I've got a question here. Great stuff so far. Really enjoying the presentation is one of the comments from somebody. Um,
thank you.
it, uh, oh, the picture you had of James M. Oakland that was working on
I'm still,
cataloging. So
yeah,
he was a CCC guy.
yes,
Um,
there he is.
so did he catalog everything and then then the collection got split up or
He was cataloging it as it came out of the ground, so you could keep track of
okay.
where it came, what room, things like that.
Mm.
And those stayed, those records are likely with the artifacts. I don't know because this was obviously well before my time. Um,
Right.
and so when the museum was built, all of that material would have come here, notes included. And then
Mm-hmm.
once in 1950 when federal government pulled out and we became a state institution, all of that stuff went to Tucson, to the Western Archaeological Conservation
Oh,
Center, WAC is what it's called.
whack. Okay.
And so that's where everything from those excavations, the 1920s excavations, though, that material is actually, most of that is at the Smithsonian, at the Museum of the American Indian. And we actually do have a little bit here because it was sent up to the Historical Society back
Mm-hmm.
in the 1920s, because 1925,
Yeah.
Historical Society was the only museum,
Yeah.
state institution here. So it went up there, and then that has come down two different trips in 2017, and then I brought some back in 2019. So we found out that that material actually belongs to Lake Mead and not us. But yeah,
Oh.
because it was part of the site, but we've
Oh.
done a long-term loan with it. So we
Okay.
in 2023 we premiered this talk with the film and also this exhibit on Pueblo Grande de Nevada because we were the Lost City Museum that had no artifacts on display from the Lost City. Seems kind of funny to do that. So we created
Yeah.
this exhibit. So they're on a long-term loan for us now, so that we can have that exhibit.
Nice. Oh, that's
Yeah,
very good. So at what point, now I was surprised. I don't think I realized that Harrington didn't actually write up a report
yeah.
about his findings versus like when he worked with Lost or Lovelock Cave.
Yeah,
So,
he wrote up a few things here and there, like a few papers, but
Mhm.
what we know, most of what Harrington found actually came from Richard Shuttler, who in 1963, I want to say, wrote up Harrington's notes with photos of the artifacts. But
Okay.
also, this is 40 years after Harrington had excavated there.
Oh, wow.
So he wrote it
Okay.
up, but we don't have Harrington's interpretations of what he found.
Okay. Oh, that's very interesting. Um, so maybe, so when did the mindset change? Like you said that Harrington went to New Mexico, brought some shards, and they were like, no, they can't be
It,
the Anastasia. So when did they start
I
realizing it
think
actually
once,
was connections?
so he did, like I said, he published papers here and there. People who were here knew about this. Like, it was fine, because
Okay.
you had Richard Shuttler, you had Louis Shellbach, who was another one, Sidney Wheeler, who was state archaeologist. He worked here too. He actually excavated out at a site called Black Dog Cave, which is on um, further west of here, but still along the Muddy River. So it was known, and people had researched it, but it wasn't until really, it was, like I said, it was known, but by 1970s, 80s, you had Margaret Linus, you had Claude Warren, you had a lot of those Southern Nevada archaeologists, Richard Brooks, that had done a lot of stuff out here.
Yeah.
And then Margaret Linus did an article in World Archaeology, I want to say in 1995, called The Far West Puebloans, talking about this, the Virgin Anasazi or ancestral Puebloan. So
Okay.
it was known, but a lot of the early archaeologists of the day of the 20s and 30s, because most of your ancestral Puebloan stuff was coming out of that Four Corners region, like at Chaco
Mhm.
Canyon,
Yeah.
Wupaki, the Salmon Ruin, Aztec Ruin, places like that, big sites.
Okay. So is it the Hopi that are the
Yes.
closest connection?
Yeah, we do have Moapa Band Paiute that is here.
Okay.
They from artifacts, we know they came in roughly around 1200 AD 1200. So this area was inhabited by the ancestral Puebloan roughly from about 1 AD, though we do have dates for earlier occupations as well, but for like Pit House and Pueblo,
Mhm.
80 1 AD to about 1250 AD. So about 12, over 1200 years. And then so there was some overlap between the Puebloan and the Paiute, but as far as where the Puebloan folks went, we're not sure. Some probably assimilated in with the Paiute, some probably moved in with the Patayan, some probably headed east, like more into Arizona with Kayenta. But they had left this region and doing some other work like bioarchaeological work. Jim Watson out of the University of Arizona had done a lot of work with some of the skeletal remains, like analyzing and looking at traits and things, and have since there's since been determination that it is the Hopi, and even the Paiute have said that as far as with some of the folks here too. Um, and then we know from what I understand, there's some Hopi stories that have passed down through generations talking about their ancestors from lands to the west,
Oh,
which, I mean, that's a big area. It's like, 300 miles from here where the reservation is currently. But still, having those stories and, and they left their lands and came here. So, you know, likely there, maybe.
well, it's interesting. So that's a longer period than the wasn't it like 800 to 1200? Or am I wrong with the Four Corners? Was it? 1 AD. So that just
So that's going from like basket maker, like so when you're in
oh,
the
okay.
pit
All right, sorry.
houses. So that's
Okay.
covering basket maker up through P3, so Pueblo 3 period at 1250, where you
Okay.
still had, continuing on in the Four Corners region into you've got Pueblo 4 and Pueblo 5 from there.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so there was some overlap because if you go into the archaeology, we have turquoise items here that have been sourced to mines that are in Colorado that would be around that time. So the Villa Grove mines are from there, but there's also turquoise from like Aztec ruin and Salmon ruin that are coming from, in Nevada as well. So north central Nevada and then over near the Royston mines in Tonopah as
Okay.
well.
Yeah.
So one of the rooms at Chaco Canyon, all of the turquoise in there had been sourced to Tonopah and the Royston region, which is really cool, especially for those of us here in Nevada, and those of us that love turquoise. So yeah, there was overlap, and massive trade networks too, because we have shell also from the coast because we
Okay.
have Olivella, we have the Channel Islands, all of that.
Okay. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, and that's what I've always understood, that yeah, they had an elaborate,
Yes,
trade route along through there. So, and then they also mined salt, correct?
yes. There was
Okay.
some that
Or is that a
Harrington
little bit
did
further
excavate,
or
but
okay.
salt doesn't always preserve. It
Oh,
dissolves. So
yeah.
Harrington did note out at Pueblo Grande de Nevada. He had some cordage with salt on it. He had some salt chunks that came out of the site itself and not just from the mines as well.
Okay.
So
Wow. So, was there anything new since working here or looking at collections and the photos that, like you said, you were hoping it was the pageant itself, but anything you've learned or were surprised about, as you've been
for
working
me, I
with the
think
Lost
part of it
City for
is
a while?
just the sheer number of people who worked out here, the sheer amount of dirt that they moved. Because back, so was mentioned, I'm from Tennessee originally, and we had a lot of the WPA. So it was another one of the New Deal programs, the Works Progress
Mhm.
Administration. And they also did a lot of archaeology, moved a lot of dirt at several sites throughout Tennessee, but also throughout the Southeast. Spiral Mounds in Oklahoma was a big one. And it's amazing to see on that scale exactly what all they accomplished. And it looks good, it's not, they are moving a lot of dirt. They're moving, and in this case, they've got a time constraint because once that dam is built, they're not going to be able to, excavate, which is why we had this. But yeah, just seeing how big this was in little southern Nevada and little St. Thomas and Overton that is off the beaten path. Um, and just what we had out here.
Very cool. Neal, did you want to ask a question or
Well, I
comment or?
just wanted to comment to Virginia that she she demonstrated the value of archaeology, period. And this is great stuff, and I can't thank her enough. It was a wonderful program, and we hope more people tune in and are able to share it because it's darn well worthwhile.
Thank you.
Yeah, and and do you want to talk a little bit about, because I knew it was coming up and now it is your 90th birthday, correct?
Yeah,
For Lost
yeah,
City?
we're having our 90. It's actually the 100th anniversary of the pageant this year.
Oh, it is. You're
Yeah,
right.
of
Okay.
the
Okay.
first pageant. So there were two pageants, 19 both in 25 and 26. I think they had hoped to make it kind of a yearly thing, but I think funding and stuff, it kind of fizzled out after 2 years. So one of the things we're hoping to do, I don't know if it's going to happen, but part of the whole America 250, which is next year, we're hoping to do our Native American Heritage Day as part of that. And that's where we're, reaching out with the Pueblo of Zuni and reaching out to the Mwapa to try to get them involved with this, because it is the 100th year of the pageant, of the 1926 pageant. We had hopes. So Dr. or Mark Harrington, he was married 3 different times, and his third wife, I think it was, he had a niece with it, because of his wife's his third marriage, and she was an archaeologist as well, and she was Native, so which was huge. So Willis Evans being an archaeologist in the 1920s and 30s, being a Native American and being an archaeologist, that's huge. Harrington was kind of pretty much like a innovator, trailblazer. I'm not sure the word, because he always wanted a Native person on his crew, because as he said, this is their land. They should be the ones here doing this. And so then having his niece, who was a person of color, Native American, and an archaeologist and a woman, all of that in the 30s, that's huge as well. So she married, going around about here, she was married to Iron Eyes Cody, who, if you ever remember the old commercials, the crying Indian from the with the littering. So that was how it was
Yeah.
billed. That was him. Turns out he actually was not Native, he was Sicilian. But they adopted a couple of kids, and one of them went on to become a very big Navajo flutist. And so we were going to reach out and, like, for this, like, because even if he couldn't be a part of the pageant, maybe because they were adopted as older kid, like 11, 12 years old, and Harrington was still alive, so maybe he would have met him. We were going to reach out, found out on Facebook he had literally passed away the week before. So we lost that connection, and that's like really the last connection that we would have to Harrington with the family.
Okay.
But that was what we were hoping to do for the pageant. But we're reaching out with the Zuni, and hoping to get answers there. And if we could get some of them to come here, obviously we would not recreate the pageant, but if we could have talks by people, because that's a big part of their history too. Like, they were hired to come out, they were brought over on train from Arizona, New Mexico, out here for this. So
What train was
I
it, or
don't
spur,
know.
do you know? Okay.
It's in the correspondence we have about it, it literally just says train.
Oh,
So that's
I
all
was
I
like,
know.
what branch? Wow, that's very cool. No, that would be amazing if you're able to document more and learn more
Yeah.
about who actually was involved in it and be able to help, share their
Yes.
stories and be part of it. So yeah, it's very interesting, just that whole history. So, well, it sounds like you guys got some great stuff uh,
Yeah,
working in the works, and
we do.
I just find it amazing and just um we just it's just it's a great museum. If you've never been there, you definitely want to
If you've never been, you should
come.
come, because we are a pretty great museum. I'll toot my own horn there.
No, it is. It's very cool.
Because
And
we're pretty unique too. We're the oldest building in the state system still being used as a museum. You're the
it's
oldest museum, we're the second oldest.
yes.
So, but
Well, and
oldest
yeah, I
building.
mean, and the thing too, like you said, is that the building was built for the museum. Do you know how many times it's been added on
So
to?
3. There
Okay.
was an expansion in 1973, which put the one gallery in and included the library. And then in 81, that was the final expansion. So that enclosed the Pueblo that's on the grounds. And then it added my lab space, and my office space was put in the 81 renovations or expansion. They did add bathroom, like better bathrooms, What we currently have, I think that was in the 90s when those were put in. So that was I was going to say that was the last big renovation. We had more back 3 years ago now in 22. We were like going to be redoing some bathrooms, and they fixed the one in the front that I had shown you on the PowerPoint, that it's now a working bathroom again. It hadn't worked in like 5 years. But what was really neat too is they took up the whole floor of that, so it's down to the dirt floor, and I'm like, this has not seen the light of day since this was built in 35, which that was really cool too. And get excited over a bathroom. So
Hey, it's awesome. It really is. It just the evolution and
yeah.
changes. And like you
And
said,
we used to.
we were chatting, weren't you? And you were talking about a rug. You want to talk a little about the
Oh
floor
yeah, so
in the
the floor
museum?
is the sandstone from Valley of Fire, and it's the same sandstone that was put down in 1935. We have rugs as you come in that covers part of it. And one of the things I do when I give a tour is I'll pull that back, and it's the original red sandstone. So what you expect, like if you've been down to Valley of Fire and you see that red Aztec sandstone is what it's called. So it gets covered. The floor was sealed. We're thinking probably in the 70s or so, and it's been, sealant's been added ever since. But we keep that one under so we don't have to worry about it fading, because I would love for the rest of the floor to look like that. The rest of it is brown, like where it's just faded to a brown color through years of traffic before it was sealed. You had 40 years of at least, and that's assuming it was sealed in the 70s. It could have been in the 80s. So, 40 or 50 years of traffic on that, people walking. Um,
Oh, absolutely.
so lots of people have come through and walked on that. And
That's very
also,
cool.
back when it was a federal institution, they had a ranger that lived here, who lived full time, and there were several rangers through the years that lived there, and then ultimately, our groundskeeper, who still works here, lived there, and then 2008, 9, something like that, they decided that we didn't need to have somebody full time, because the apartment is actually still attached to the museum. And so there's, if it was separated, it might have been different, but now those are offices. So our director's office is back there, and our admin as well. And then we have the original
Okay.
garage that's storage, and you can actually see the exposed adobe brick in the garage still too. So that's kind of cool.
Okay. Oh, that's very cool. Well, this was just an awesome program. And another person said, very interesting program, had no clue about all this history. And no, it's a hidden gem, like in your talk,
Yes.
in the title. Well, I thank you, Jenny. It was just lovely,
You're
and thank you for
welcome.
saying yes. And that's what I like about this High Noon series, being able to be online and working with our amazing partners, the Washoe County Libraries, to be able to have great talks and
Yeah.
get them recorded, having them on YouTube. And so you can watch them at any time. So even if you weren't able to see this today, you can watch it at 2 a.m., if you want. So it's very cool. But it was a great program, and I love the film footage. So that was a wonderful hidden gem, I guess, to be able to see that. So I will say thank you, and I will say thank you to Jennifer and Tim, and I'll head it
Well,
back to Jennifer.
thank you for having me.
Thank you, Virginia, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Sherry Hayes Zorn and Neal Cobb, the Nevada Historical Society, and to Tim, this month's Washoe County Library System Tech Assistant. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.